Hi, this is Joshua Hammer, author and freelance correspondent, speaking to you from Phoenix, Arizona. I recently returned from a journey through Zimbabwe for the New York Review of Books, where I reported on the last days of the dictator, Robert Mugabe. The week-long trip sponsored by the Pulitzer Center for Crisis Reporting was my 10th trip to Zimbabwe since 1990, when I paddled down the Zambezi River and visited game parks to commemorate the 10th anniversary of the end of white minority rule. Since then, I've watched the country slide downhill from one of Africa's bright hopes into a morass of violence and poverty, largely thanks to the ruinous policies of Mugabe and his ruling ZANU-PF party. I reported on the seizure of white-owned farms in the early 2000s, a misguided land reform effort that ended up bankrupting the country's commercial agriculture. In 2008, I reported on the election in which Mugabe violently stole victory from the opposition challenger Morgan Tsvangirai. And in 2011, I visited the Marange diamond fields, where Mugabe's cronies were smuggling out billions of dollars worth of the gems, enriching themselves while their countrymen starved. By the year 2017, last year, I'd pretty much given up hope on Zimbabwe, and in fact had stopped paying attention to the country, assuming that Mugabe would linger on in power until he died. So I was surprised and even optimistic when I read in mid-November that Mugabe had been deposed in a military coup following a bitter falling out with his right-hand man, hatchet man, and vice president Emmanuel Mnangagwa. 2 weeks later, I was on a plane to Bulawayo, Zimbabwe's second city, and then on to Harare, the capital, where I rendezvoused with old sources and cultivated new ones, including members of the ruling party, leading officials of the ruling party who would never have dared talk to me during the Mugabe era. The story that I pieced together is a Shakespearean drama about a nonagenarian dictator and his much younger wife, whose rapaciousness and hunger for power grew ever stronger as her husband became more and more feeble. The machinations of Mugabe's wife, Grace Mugabe, touched off a bizarre endgame that included an alleged poisoning of Mnangagwa with tainted ice cream, his clandestine flight across the border to South Africa, a tense standoff at Harare's airport between Mugabe's police loyalists and army special forces disguised as baggage handlers, and a violent, furious shootout in a normally placid Harare suburb. The story ended with Mugabe and his wife under house arrest, Emmanuel Mnangagwa installed as Mugabe's successor, and a desperate and impoverished country hoping against hope for a new beginning. It's a story that I never imagined that I would witness, and that you can read about in a forthcoming issue of the New York Review of Books.